Well, we don't know, Xoli, because there's been lots of discussion between the lawyers representing the Zulu Queen who's tried to interdict those two wedding ceremonies and the lawyers representing King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini. Now, naturally, because of that letter written to the Director General within the KZN Office of the Premier, Dr. Nonhlanhla Mkhize, in that letter when he was withdrawing those benefits and the security detail of Queen Nomzamo Myeni, he also indicated in writing that the wedding would be called off. However, as you've mentioned in that IOL article, he said, "Ngizomshada ngenkani, I will marry her by force." And this is what sources are telling us is primarily and is precisely why then, the first queen is forging ahead with this urgent interdict. Now, Xoli, you'll know, having covered court cases, that urgency needs to be proven when dealing with an urgent court interdict. And what exactly would be interdicted then if the king has said in writing that those two wedding ceremonies that were set to take place on Friday in Jozini and on Sunday at Kwakhangela Mankengane Royal Palace are not taking place? So to make sense of all of this, let's bring in now legal expert Mpumelelo Zikalala to talk about this, because there is quite a lot of discussion. In fact, sources were telling me that at this very hour, they were waiting for a confirmation from the king's lawyers to the queen's lawyers that he will not go ahead with those weddings in writing so that they can withdraw this interdict. But let's just say those conversations don't go anywhere. Will a judge be willing to entertain this urgent interdict given the latest developments over the last 24 hours?
Good afternoon to you and also good afternoon to our viewers. Yes, they will, because the job of the judge is to sit and assess in terms of the papers that have been submitted. But the judge is going to look at the following things. It says, when you come in here for an urgent application, I must see, is there a prima facie right which I'm supposed to protect? What is that right and what is the extent of the protection? Secondly, are there other alternative remedies that you could have engaged in order to resolve this dispute? If there's none, then let's check the other one. Is the irreparable harm which is going to be suffered, which I think would be the nub of this particular application, because if you say irreparable, the easiest definition of it is to say it must be a matter of life and death, and there must be no other avenue available within our legal structures which is going to allow you for that reprieve or put you in a position that you could have been had the harm had not occurred. Now, if you look at it in the nature of the papers that have been submitted, it's mostly about matrimonial property rights. You do have forfeitures in our Divorce Act that you can be able to apply, and those particular rights or whatever matrimonial property that may be engaged or no longer be found, there are forfeiture avenues which are available. But the other one is the balance of convenience, which is looked at by the court to say, let's look at the merits, let's look at what the facts are about and see what are the chances of you succeeding in the main application. That's when they have to come back and check. I cannot force you as the judge to continue to love someone when you don't love them anymore. There are divorce proceedings that have been instituted in this matter. That means, or boiling down the bone of contention to matrimonial property. Is it something that warrants you jumping the queue and your matter to be heard on an urgent basis, or is it something that can be dealt with at a later stage?
But from what we know, this marriage that the king entered into with this particular wife was a civil marriage and in community of property. If you are saying there is no matrimonial, property to be shared, are you basically saying that this particular wife has no claim to any assets that the king has?
No, not at all. There is a claim in terms of the law, because that's the basis of what you are married in, and the matrimonial property that you are married in commercial property. But the most important question would be, in the matrimonial property which is protected by the Matrimonial Property Act, what is it that you're seeking to protect? Is it full-on assets, immovable assets, or movable assets that are there? Are they houses? Are they cars? Are they investments? That must be clearly defined to say, this is what you are seeking to protect. Also check this in the back of what has been submitted in the divorce papers, in which the king is saying that I do not have any property that belongs to me. Whatever that you see, or utilities, or any other assets that I may be using, I'm using it on the virtue of that I'm a king and occupying the seat. They're not personally mine. To clearly define those, you have to go back and say, if we would punch on the king's ID number in the assets register, is there any immovable property which is going to appear? Are there any cars or any shares which are going to be there? That's the matrimonial property that's seeking to be protected. But in discussing all of that, part 2 of it then says, What is it that can be done at a later stage? If the order is not granted tomorrow, is it the end of it in which the Queen was not going to have any other avenue which is available to her in order to pursue this matter? And some may argue that there are still avenues which are available at a later stage, even though they may come at a much, much later stage, but the avenue is there.
And that's important because you've mentioned that the courts would have to deal with the facts before them. And just today, the story has changed so much in terms of the facts that are on the table in relation to these two wedding ceremonies that are scheduled for next Friday and Sunday. In a signed letter to the DG in the Office of the Premier, he says the wedding is called off. But previously, in his own court papers, the AmaZulu monarch says he knows nothing about any wedding. It's just rumors. And then there's also this article running on IOL quoting him as saying that he's forging ahead with the weddings. What does the court do in a situation like this?
Well, the court would want to hear what the king has got to say because he needs to respond. So tomorrow, his lawyers have to come to court and say, are we opposing this matter or we are not opposing the matter? If we are not opposing the matter, still the court will have to deal with what the nature of the order is supposed to be. And looking at it, some may argue that some of the terms of the nature of the order is final because there's no other provision which is allowed to say, we are stopping on a temporal basis upon this particular process has been done and dusted, and then you can continue when the matter has been done or adjudicated fully at a later stage. And if the court, the matter goes there, then the court will have no other option than to sit and entertain the matter on the basis of the agency, on the basis of how the order has been written, and then take a decision based on that one. Or they can come in tomorrow and say, well, let's engage in a settlement agreement. We are willing to give you those particular undertakings. However, we're not going to pay for the cost of this application because we haven't opposed it. But let's agree this is how things are going to be moving forward. Or they may choose on to engage in a full-on defense. That defense will then say, well, on urgency, these are the points in which we are fighting about or that we want to submit to the court. However, let's also look at what you are alleging. You are alleging that a marriage is supposed to take place. Our defense is that, in fact, it is not a marriage in its full-on sense. That would warrant any registration of any marriage according to the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. There are a number of procedures that need to be done in a customary marriage, and we haven't reached the final stage as yet. It's only maybe part 9 of 10. The last stage is going to be reached after the divorce has been done and dusted, in which we've given our intention to say we no longer want to be married. That's a clear indication of saying where the king is in terms of this whole process. So you may have wanted to go through and forge ahead, but you may have jumped the gun a bit, wait a bit, and allow the process to follow through.
It's going to be an interesting court hearing tomorrow, a legal showdown expected, and the fruits of those discussions between the two legal teams will bear fruit, and we'll see then what happens. A lot on the horizon. The king is also expected to address the annual Battle of Isandlwana ceremony, and all eyes will be looking towards the AmaZulu monarch to hear what his direction is. So much litigation surrounding King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini. Lots of conversation around this. This is the first time a divorce is being instituted against a royal queen. It's the first time that we also see then an interdict. So all the matters of the royal household now being arbitrated by the courts, and a long week ahead to see whether or not those two wedding ceremonies will take place on Friday and Sunday next weekend.